Governments love to claim that they work for your economic freedom. They talk about stability, growth, and opportunity. But when you take a closer look at history, you'll find a much darker truth. For centuries, governments have used hidden financial tricks to keep ordinary people poor while concentrating wealth and power in their own hands. And the shocking part is, these tricks aren't new. They've been recycled for centuries, rebranded under new names, but the purpose has always remained the same: to transfer wealth upward and keep the majority dependent. The oldest trick, inflation. Let's start with the simplest and oldest trick of all, inflation. When a government spends more than it collects through taxes, it faces two choices. It can tell the truth and openly raise taxes, which is politically dangerous, or it can quietly reduce the value of money. Ancient Rome mastered this tactic. In the 3rd century AD, emperors began lowering the silver content of the denarius to pay for rising military costs. A coin that was once almost pure silver eventually became mostly copper with just a thin silver coating. Nothing seemed to change on the surface, but people were getting poorer by the day. Prices soared, wages collapsed, and savings vanished. It was a silent tax, one that still exists today, only now it's executed through central banks instead of imperial mints. The medieval game, forced loans. In the Middle Ages, the trick evolved, but the principle stayed the same. Kings of England, France, and Spain forced wealthy merchants to lend money to the crown. Of course, it wasn't voluntary. Refusal meant fines, confiscation, or worse. The kings often promised to repay with interest, but payments were made late, in debased currency, or not at all. The result? Palaces remained standing, wars continued, but merchants lost their fortunes. Coercion was rebranded as patriotism, and that illusion lasted for centuries. The 17th century, when the system itself became the trick. When the Bank of England was founded in 1694, it wasn't a charity, it was a war machine. Wealthy investors lent money to the government in exchange for interest-bearing bonds. But where did that interest come from? From the people. New taxes were placed on everyday goods: salt, beer, fabric. So the rich lent to the state and earned guaranteed returns, while the poor paid those returns through higher taxes. It was called national finance, but it was actually a refined system of wealth transfer, and it still exists today. The so-called safest investments, government bonds, are secured by the labor of ordinary citizens. The modern version, debt and bailouts. In modern times, the tricks became more sophisticated. Governments borrow massive amounts and issue bonds to cover deficits. Politicians claim it's for infrastructure, welfare, or jobs. But much of that money flows into defense contracts, corporate subsidies, and bailout packages. When it's time to pay the bill, spending at the top doesn't shrink. Taxes rise, money loses value, and public support is cut. The trick is simple. The debt is presented as being for the people, but the burden falls on the people, and the profits go to the bondholders. 2008 and beyond. Private profits, public losses. In 2008, banks gambled with risky loans and inflated a massive bubble. When it burst, who paid the price? Taxpayers. And who profited? The very same banks, now even bigger and stronger. Profits were privatized, losses were socialized, and the public was told, we have to save the system. Retirement, the silent Ponzi scheme. The pension system is another grand illusion. For decades, people have trusted the government to save a portion of their income for the future. But most governments never saved that money. They spent it. What's left in the vaults are promises. We'll pay you later. The system is nothing more than an intergenerational debt chain. When it starts collapsing, governments rebrand the cuts as reforms, reducing benefits, raising retirement age, or letting inflation quietly erode payments. The power of language, masking reality. The common thread among all these tricks is perception management. Inflation becomes growth. Forced loans become patriotic duty. Government debt becomes investment. Bailouts become stability. Pension cuts become reform. In reality, they're all just wealth transfers from the bottom to the top. The 21st century, more complex, more invisible. Terms like quantitative easing were almost unheard of before 2008. Then central banks began creating trillions of dollars out of thin air to buy bonds and securities. Markets were saved, asset prices soared. But who owned those assets? The rich. The middle and lower classes gained nothing but rising costs of living. The formula is simple. Rescue the top, crush the bottom with inflation. The hidden tax, inflation. Instead of raising taxes directly, governments use silent taxes. Sales taxes, fuel taxes, and most of all, inflation. When prices rise faster than wages, purchasing power falls. That difference is effectively a hidden tax. Governments love inflation because it erodes the real value of their debt. But for the people, it's the slow death of financial freedom. You may earn more in numbers, but in reality, you're getting poorer. The regulation game, buying the referee. Governments often pass laws to protect the public, but in reality, those regulations serve the interests of giant corporations. In the 19th century, it was railroads. In the 20th, it was oil, and today it's tech and finance giants. They all know the value of buying the referee. The public believes they're being protected, but real competition is quietly killed.